This is how the Mau Mau survived the brutal British rule in Kenya. In the early 1950s, the British Empire ruled Kenya with force and confidence. It had soldiers, aircrafts, and prisons. But deep in the forests and villages, a resistance movement refused to disappear. They were called the Mau Mau. And this is how they survived one of the most powerful and brutal empires in history. British colonial rule in Kenya was built on land seizure. Fertile land was taken from Africans and given to European settlers. Kenyans were forced into labor, taxed heavily, and pushed into overcrowded reserves. By the 1940s, anger had reached a breaking point. The Mau Mau were not a single army. They were farmers, laborers, veterans, and villagers, mostly from the Kikuyu community. What united them was one goal: reclaim land and dignity. They had limited weapons, but they had something stronger: commitment. The Mau Mau survived by disappearing into the land. They used the dense forests of Mount Kenya and the Aberdare Range as natural shields. These forests provided cover, food, and escape routes. British forces struggled to fight an enemy they could barely see. The Mau Mau avoided direct battles. Instead, they relied on guerrilla warfare. Small units, surprise attacks, night raids. They struck quickly and vanished before British forces could respond. This kept the movement alive despite heavy losses. The Mau Mau survived because they were supported by ordinary people. Villagers smuggled food, medicine, weapons, and information. Women played a critical role as messengers and couriers. Without this civilian support, the forest fighters could not survive. Unity was enforced through sacred oaths. These oaths bound fighters and supporters to secrecy and loyalty. Breaking an oath meant betraying the community. This system created discipline and reduced infiltration. Tang, Britain responded with overwhelming force. Mass arrests, detention camps, forced village relocations, torture and collective punishment became routine. More than 1 million Kenyans were detained or controlled. Yet the rebellion did not collapse. Survival was not just about weapons. It was about belief. The Mau Mau believed they were fighting for land, identity, and future generations. This psychological strength kept the movement alive despite fear and loss. Militarily, the Mau Mau were eventually defeated. Many leaders were captured or killed. But the rebellion exposed the brutality of colonial rule to the world. Britain realized control could no longer be maintained through force alone. The Mau Mau uprising changed Kenyan history. It forced political reform and negotiations. In 1963, Kenya gained independence. Once labeled terrorists, the Mau Mau are now recognized as freedom fighters. The Mau Mau survived through strategy, unity, and sacrifice. They proved that even empires can be challenged. Their story reminds us that power is never absolute. Understanding the survival of the Mau Mau against British rule in Kenya. In the early 1950s, the British Empire had a firm grip on Kenya. Their forces included soldiers, aircraft, and prisons. However, in the forests and villages, a brave resistance continued. This group was known as the Mau Mau. This is their story of survival against one of history's mightiest empires. British colonial authority in Kenya relied heavily on land appropriation. They seized fertile land from Africans for European settlers. Kenyans faced forced labor, heavy taxation, and overcrowded reserves. By the 1940s, frustration had reached critical levels. The Mau Mau were a diverse coalition. It included farmers, laborers, veterans, and villagers, primarily from the Kikuyu community. Their shared objective was to regain land and dignity. Though their weapons were limited, their commitment was unwavering. The Mau Mau thrived by blending into the landscape. They utilized the dense forests of Mount Kenya and the Aberdare Range for cover. These wooded areas offered food, shelter, and escape paths. British forces found it hard to confront an elusive enemy. The Mau Mau avoided conventional battles altogether. Instead, they utilized guerrilla tactics, engaging in small groups, surprise assaults, and nighttime raids. They struck swiftly, retreating before British forces could react. This strategy kept the movement viable despite suffering significant losses. The survival of the Mau Mau was deeply rooted in community support. Villagers assisted by smuggling food, medicine, weapons, and vital information. Women played essential roles as couriers and messengers. Without this civilian backing, the forest fighters would have struggled. Unity was reinforced through sacred oaths. These pledges bound fighters and supporters to secrecy and fidelity. Violating an oath meant betraying one's community. This practice established discipline and minimized infiltration. The British response was marked by overwhelming violence. Their tactics included mass arrests, detention camps, and forced relocations. Torture and collective punishment became commonplace. Over 1 million Kenyans were detained or controlled. Still, the rebellion endured. Survival transcended mere weaponry. It was fueled by conviction. The Mau Mau believed they were fighting for land, identity, and future generations. This psychological resilience kept the movement going amid fear and loss. Militarily, the Mau Mau faced defeat in the end. Numerous leaders were captured or killed. However, the rebellion laid bare the brutality of colonial governance. Britain recognized that control could not solely rely on force. The Mau Mau uprising has profoundly influenced Kenyan history. It prompted political reform and negotiations. In 1963, Kenya achieved independence. Once branded terrorists, the Mau Mau are now honored as freedom fighters. The Mau Mau survived through strategy, unity, and sacrifice. Their story illustrates that even empires can face challenges. It serves as a reminder that power is never entirely absolute. Subscribe, follow us, and remember to hit that notification bell.